Now we're back with the Dr. Z show. What's up?
We are back with the Dr. Z show.
Why would we be back with anything else?
Um, Nothing.
What else do we
There's
do
no
that we could be back with?
to the future.
We do the future, though?
Yes, we'll just bring it with us next time.
Yes, we forgot to pack the future. So,
In our suitcases.
yeah, that reminds me. We got this, Claire and I ordered these bags from Indiegogo from this, I want to say they're like a Swedish company. It's called like Avanda or something. But the bags that we ordered are called the Great Fucking Bag.
Oh wow.
And we ordered them like last year in March or something. And we still don't have them. There was like this big to do about like why they weren't shipped yet. And I'm like, look, like these bags seemed great and we paid $70 for them. But like if they get here, if they get here and they aren't the greatest fucking bag I've ever had, like I'm gonna be pissed. I don't like trust Indiegogo like at all. And she was like, "No, it'll be fine. Like it'll be okay." And I'm like fine. Like I need a new like bag like this. That'll be great because my messenger bag, the bag of holding, is like starting to
Die.
wear. It's like got holes in it now. And so I'm like, okay, like I need a new bag anyway. Like whatever, fine. They're still not here.
um. Hmm. Well then,
We're not here to talk about bags. I just like got on that
Biggs.
because I'm still upset about it. But we are here to talk about nostalgia or retro or whatever, and not in the
Nostalgia.
like review episode sense because we're only on
Retralgia.
like episode 13 or something.
Yeah, we're gonna look back at all our great episodes. Remember that one time when we talked about that thing?
Talked about that thing with the
Yeah,
people.
the thing with the place and the guys and the stuff. It's the Laser
What was
Collection 5.
what show was that? Where the second episode of it they ever did was like a throwback episode or whatever.
It was the Clerks animated series.
Ah, yes, that only ran for one season.
It was 6 episodes and it was great.
Yeah, it's like
Um,
barely a season.
yep. Um, yeah, like a quarter season by
I don't
some
know.
definitions.
American television is weird. It's like broken up in a weird way.
Yeah. Um. So
So, nostalgia and retro for games particularly. What does it mean to you?
retro to me means, or at least is beginning to mean, anything that was 25 to 30 years ago.
So, retro to you is like, let's see, 25 to 30. That's like Atari 2600 is retro.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Okay.
Game Boy Color wasn't retro when I was growing up, but it's
Because
becoming retro
becoming
because
okay.
because retro is it slides with your location and time.
True.
Although it also includes things like past that, I think. Although, like
What do you mean?
classic music, well, classic music you wouldn't necessarily describe as retro.
Yeah, you wouldn't say like this music is retro.
Yeah, but some people are starting to define, I not not everyone, but I've kind of seen some people defining classic rock as like starting to include things that are in like the 80s, and people are like, no, like classic rock is like stuff from the 60s, and they're like, no, it's like they're like the 80s far enough back now that it could be classic rock, and
Yeah, the
there's
80s, like we're talking about the
there's
80s. That's like almost 40 years ago.
I know. So like there's it kind of that idea of this time that was like before our time, that wasn't
before
too far
time.
away. Yeah, the before time that wasn't too far away. I think that's retro.
Okay.
Like I wouldn't define, that like game that kids would play that like you learn about in every 6th grade like American social studies class, where like the stick and the hoop. They're like, this is all
Yeah.
kids had to play with. Like I wouldn't describe that as retro. Like it's old timey. That's old timey to me, but not retro.
So stick and hoop is not retro.
Nope, not to me at least.
I'm kind of wondering like why you brought that up. It was very left field, but I've learned like not to question why you bring things up. I just like sort of go with it. Like, yes,
I was trying to think of
brought
a
up
game
stick,
that was old, like an old game.
one that was old, an old game.
Yeah, like chess is an old game, but it's timeless. Like you wouldn't describe chess as retro.
Okay, so games that are timeless are games that are timeless not retro?
Yeah, I wouldn't
They
describe them
they
as,
cannot become retro.
because they can't go. They like, I feel like things that are timeless won't necessarily go out of style. Like they may kind of rise and fall in popularity a little bit, but like if they never like really go out of style, then or if like there's not like I've seen some funny sketches for like new rules for chess, like patch updates and stuff. Like but it's like,
It was like something the
chess
Onion
is,
released.
yeah, it's like chess is still chess. Chess is the same chess that it was, like, more or less when it was invented. Like,
Okay.
or standardized more specifically. But so anyways, don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but like I feel like retro is things that are like that we've evolved from, that are like maybe,
We have the
yeah, but that are in like their like earlier state, but it isn't too far in the past that like no one remembers it. Like stick and hoop, like no one remembers that, but like people are vaguely aware that they're like Pac-Man was a game, and like Pong was a game, like, and so
Okay. Pac-Man and Pong. I was gonna ask like what are your like representations for like this is something that everyone knows, like popular culture, like this is something that everyone knows about that is a retro game.
yeah, Space Invaders, Galaga,
Okay.
and not everyone knows Galaga. So
Yeah, some people only know Galaxian, but those people are savages and they're not to be trusted.
okay, for you then, I mean, I don't know if you want to answer if we've talked this to death, but do you want to talk about nostalgia?
Nostalgia for me is something that like is kind of dangerous. Not like my life is in danger or dangerous, but like dangerous like okay, well here's a really good example actually from here's a good example, and it's not about games, unfortunately. It's about movies. So remember when you came over, like you hadn't seen the old
X-Men 3.
X-Men movies. Yes, you know
No,
exactly what
I'd seen 1 and 2, but I hadn't seen 3 because
you hadn't seen 3 yet. And I was like, "Oh, X-Men 3 is like it's really good." And you were like, okay." Like you weren't sure, but you didn't know like you didn't know any better. So you were
I had
like,
been told that it was awful. Like that's what all my siblings had said. They're like, "Man, X-Men 3 was the worst." I was like, "Okay."
But anyway, point. You like came over and I was like, "Oh yeah, like we're gonna watch X-Men 3. Like you haven't seen it yet. Like it's really good." And I remember watching it, and like after like the credits rolled, and I was like, "Wait, that movie sucked." Like, why did I think it was so good? And it was just like the time that I had seen it. At the time, I was like, "Oh, this is like so good." Like, what a fool I was. So that to me is like nostalgia. Is like when you remember something better. So like I remembered the X-Men movie and I was like, "Oh, like this is better than, like it would be normally because of the time that I had watched it. I like had a good time when I like went to see it or whatever.
Okay.
That to me is nostalgia. And it
Okay.
doesn't always work out that way. It doesn't mean like, whatever you're nostalgic for like is always garbage. It just
That's true.
in that case, it was extra garbage. God, that was so terrible.
I think that's a good like description of nostalgia. Like nostalgia is kind of that feeling when like re-experiencing something. And we use it a lot more for like well, it's really for any experience. Like, you could feel nostalgia over like a certain food. Like Ratatouille is like a great example of that concept.
Oh yeah, I like the movie right too. I was like, what?
Yeah. And then, that ability for an experience to bring you back to the first time or a fond memory you have
Yeah.
of a similar experience.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay, I know exactly.
but
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
so okay, I think that's good.
And it doesn't always have like I said, it doesn't always have to be bad, but it also doesn't always have to be good. Like, it can bring you back to like some shit. Oh wait.
I feel like nostalgia is usually used to remember for positive memories, but the actual thing that you experienced, like in the end, may not like critically be good, or like later in life you may not think that it's like great. Like I was
Here's another
like,
example. The end. Remember when we stayed up really late, like till like 3 o'clock in the morning or something, playing Minecraft,
yeah,
and we discovered the end and fought the Ender Dragon?
yeah,
I have like every time I start Minecraft or like I'm thinking about like playing Minecraft, I like have that like moment where I like remember that time that we stayed up and like played that part
yeah,
of Minecraft. And that's like I would say that that's like a nostalgia feeling.
yes. Something that speaking of like also nostalgia, coloring an experience and then realizing that it was terrible was like I grew up with like the opinion that Golden Corral was like awesome. Like because the few
That it was
times that I went
awesome.
when I was like the few times that I went when I was a little kid, I was like infinite mashed potatoes. Like this is amazing. But then I went as an adult and I was like, wow, this food is terrible. And so like that's like
All right, if you like Golden Corral, you suck. Got it.
I mean, I don't know. The
Arguably,
they
the
probably have
quality of
something
food
that
at
is good.
Golden Corral is not great.
And most, to a degree, I'd argue like a lot of buffet style restaurants. Like there's some high end buffet style restaurants where like everything is quality, but like those ones where it's like $8 to get in, like a lot of times it's like meh.
Well, it's because they have to make like a lot of food like en masse for like a lot of people, or for just like that one fat person that's there for 7 centuries. So they just like have to make all this food, and like you can't make not all food works like that. Like you can't make an infinite quantity of mashed potatoes and expect like every single like batch or whatever to turn
I
out
was just
perfectly.
I was just imagining like the like the end of the universe, like
The mashed
being
potato,
mashed. Yeah,
the inevitable mashed potato end of the universe.
the great mashing. Um, the world will end in fire or ice. No.
Potatoes.
What's Taters Precious?
What?
Speaking of nostalgia, what have you seen the Potatoes remix?
Yes.
When like
Yeah.
it's so speaking of
That's
nostalgia, if anyone
old
gets
hat
that reference,
too.
yeah, I saw that in Albino Black Sheep when that was a
Wow.
big Flash
Those were
website.
the days.
They were the days. Um, those were the days. I mean, speaking of
Those were the
nostalgia,
days.
that's a good example. So,
Back on track.
yeah. So I guess nostalgia is usually remembering a positive experience. Is there like anti-nostalgia? Is that trauma?
I don't know if it's considered like it's not all it. Yes and no. Like yes, but not always. So like, okay, here's a good example, and you get some extra points on your card if you know what the hell we're talking about. The time that you and I met,
Okay.
the first time.
Yes.
Anytime I remember that, I like cringe and I'm like, oh, what the fuck? Like,
I think me laughing there was gonna make like all of the viewer or all of the listeners who have no idea about that experience, like all of them are gonna be like, oh, like obviously Jacob was like
was
he must
okay.
like no or like he must have done something terrible because like because your reaction is like cringing and I'm just like like
Hilarious.
I
I
mean
don't
probably
know. I'm like still mad at myself about it. Like, should I be?
nah. There's a lot of stuff that I've learned to just like write off as like I was young.
Yeah, but like, I don't know. This is gonna become that one of those like social discussions. Like, do you want to raise your kids that way? That's what I think about. I'm like, yeah, like you can like say like, oh, we were young, like we didn't know any better. Like, oh, we were young, like we were just kids. But like, does that inherently make it okay to
Um,
to do terrible things or to do things that are like objectively wrong?
I would say like it's more a matter of like let's say you hadn't changed at all, then like if you were still that same person and you were just now realizing it, like I would say it would be well within reason to feel bad for like the way that you had been living your life and like that moment reminds you of like the way that you were living your life or something like that. But like, you know,
I sort of follow that. Okay.
so like having changed from that, like, you know, I know like there's people still feel like tinges of guilt over things they've done in the past, even though they've changed. And like I
Yeah,
think that's natural.
100%.
But
Like that happens to me more than I like. Like more honestly, like kind of more than I want to admit. But I mean, yeah.
yeah, and I think that's like completely natural, but I don't think that like anyone necessarily needs to let that like sit with them forever. Like I think we remember those things to remember not to do them, but we're not meant to like define ourselves
By
as
them.
like by that for the rest of our lives.
Okay.
So like if someone met you
Well,
now, like they're not gonna be like, oh, like you were that kid who did that thing, like when you were younger. Like they're like, how do you know that?
yeah, first of all, like how the hell do you know that? Second of all, stay away from me, you're a creep. Whew. Okay, that got real deep, real quick.
I know we got into morality
All right,
or like
back up.
okay, so nostalgia in games. Um,
Okay, so what to you? We'll start with this. What to you is like the quintessential like retro game? Like this game is retro. Like it defines retro.
hmm,
Like when you say the word retro, like what's the first game that you can think of?
it's I hate doing this, but I'm gonna do it anyway. It's like a toss up between Pac-Man and Tetris
Why?
because there's like a version of, I feel like everyone, maybe not like the most recent generation. I'm not sure. I haven't like talked to them about their gaming habits.
Okay,
Uh,
it's
the kids
the
these
youth.
days. But like I feel like everyone at some point in their life has played Tetris or like knows what it is or like will use
Yeah, if you
Tetris
hadn't
as a
done this podcast,
reference.
should be like freaking out right now.
Like they'll use Tetris as a reference to organization and like fitting things into a rectangular space. Like, you know, like if you need to get things into your fridge or whatever, you're like, oh, like I'm gonna like Tetris that. Like it's become a verb
The
that
verb.
people use to describe, you know, it's, and so I feel like that's a good example because it's old enough, and the like original art style was like you know,
Communist.
yeah, which is really funny. Like I've watched a documentary about the development of it, and it was that like whole like Russian thing, because it was developed by a Russian guy, but there was this crazy kind of legal battle over like who really owned it, because there was lots of like word of mouth deals, and then everything kind of finally
Yeah,
got down in
nothing was like
paper.
written down.
Yeah, it was real crazy. And then when it launched in U.S. markets, because it was during the Cold War, they were like, oh, like
The
this,
commies.
yeah, the commies developed this as a way to like stop like American productivity, like, and so it was like really heavily marketed like that way. But you know, anyways, so I think of that as like a good idea of retro, because like even in like newer versions of it, like
It's
a
the
lot of
same.
times it's, yeah, it's the same. It's, you know, it's not flashy the way that like Candy Crush is or was.
Yeah, Candy Crush wouldn't exist without Tetris, so we can blame Tetris for Candy Crush.
Yeah, and like I wouldn't describe Candy Crush as a retro game. Like the uh
Style of it.
yeah, maybe like the type of game it is retro in a sense, because that whole like matching things was, you know, like matching blocks and shapes and colors and everything has been around for a while, but the
Yeah.
way that it was, you know, heavily marketed for mobile, and like the uh like those changes to it and the like graphics to a degree have made it like not retro. And the other reason that I bring up Pac-Man as well is that Pac-Man, you know, with the exception of the like 3D Pac-Man games, like
Which are
Pac-Man
all
Adventures or whatever
garbage.
for
Gotta
GameCube,
say.
with the exception of those, pretty much whenever you see Pac-Man, it's like the like same sounds from the original, like, and that's how people want it. Like they want Pac-Man to stay 8-bit, like for its design and its sounds and everything. Like
Yeah, because
they don't
otherwise
want
it
a
wouldn't
new
be
Pac-Man.
Pac-Man. It would be like
Exactly.
something else.
So I think, you know, retro to agree is like, you know, in bring up fashion as a weird example, like, you know, with certain styles of clothing coming back, like they're trying
Like,
not necessarily, well, I can't give
like for
examples, but
example, oh,
um yeah, I don't, I just know that people have said that like the 80s or the 90s were coming back in style like a little bit, in like fashion, whatever. But when that happens, it's usually like they try and bring back like the look, like that look from that
the
time.
iconic
Yeah, and so I think when you
look
really talk about retro, you want to bring back the thing as it was without too much like dressing up or like
without
too much
changing it,
integration. Yeah, because if you change it, then it becomes something new, and it, in a way,
and then it
can
stops
kind of
being
cease
retro.
to be. Yeah, at least if you change it too much.
Okay. Okay. That's that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Like I could see 100% where you're going there.
What about you? What would you say are like iconic
Um.
retro games?
Well, when I think of retro, I think of like Space Invaders, like Pong. I also think about that game for the Atari, Adventure.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I don't know if you are like familiar with it.
I
or like know anything
I'm
about
not
it?
really familiar. I just know it was it like genre defining to it like
No, like you were a square and you like it was like it was the first, I want to say RPG, but there were no like RPG elements.
hmm.
Like you were a square and you like adventured across this like huge like landscape. Um, I think to rescue a princess or something.
It was
But there
also
were like there were dragons and they could like eat you unless you had like a sword and then you could like fight the dragons, but you were just like a square.
hmm.
It's the first Skyrim.
Fusro Das.
That was funnier than it should have been.
It was high level humor.
Okay. Yeah, so like to me like old like Atari 2600 like to me is the quintessential like retro like console like kind of machine. I also, and only because I like tried to remake it as my computer systems project, um, Rogue comes up a lot, like the original
Yeah.
Rogue. I know we've talked about like Rogue like and Rogue like light kind of
Hmm.
games on the podcast before, but like the first ever iteration of that, like to me is super retro. Like
I mean the genre takes its name from that game, so
yeah, so like okay, well okay, so off of that, the genre takes the name from that. Is Super Metroid or Castlevania, um, Symphony of the Night, are those retro games?
hmm. That's a
Because
hard question.
the genre Metroidvania takes its name from those games.
Hmm. That's a hard one. When did Symphony of Night come out?
Ooh, that's a
Was
good question that I
was
don't
that one of
know
the ones
the
on the
exact
Advance?
answer to. What?
Was that one of the ones on the Game Boy Advance?
No, that was it was original PlayStation. It's the one where you play Alucard.
Oh. Oh wow.
And it's the one where if you don't do a bunch of like arbitrary crap, then you miss half the game.
Hmm.
Because you play half the game, and you're like going through Dracula's castle, like killing all his minions or whatever, and then you like get to the last boss, and if you didn't do all the like arbitrary stuff beforehand, then like the game ends. But if you did a bunch of like arbitrary stuff, then the castle like flips over upside down, and you basically like backtrack through the whole thing and play
Oh,
the game like essentially twice.
that's insane. Um, hmm.
I would look up.
That's kind
I
of
would
a
look it up, but it's like my internet's not cooperating for some reason.
that's a hard one because I'm biased in this in
'Cause you
that
love
like
Metroid.
that end it is there are so many modern gamers who still look to it and still play it and speedrun it and like revere it as kind of a game not necessarily
The
not necessarily
last
that was
good
a
2D Metroid.
or like not necessarily that was ahead of its time, but that is like to use the word like timeless or like it's a classic. Like I feel like retro sometimes like sometimes retro and classic like we can in my mind they're not always equal. Like a classic is like something that is like will stand the test of time, whereas retro is like you have like people are nostalgic for it, but it's not necessarily like great. Like Pong was like great for
For its
what it was.
time, but like it's not great now.
Yeah, whereas like Super Metroid is like still great. Like
That's
so I
your
don't know.
opinion though.
I know. But it's hard
And it's
because
your opinion because you like Metroid.
but it's
You're a
also supported
Metroid
it's
fan.
supported by a ton of I mean granted this is also all people's opinions, but like there's tons of um like what is it? I can't remember the word for this. When like people like vote on like what is like
Majority?
the best game of like all time.
Democracy? Poll?
Yeah, like there have been like lots of opinion polls about like what is the greatest game of all time, and like Super Metroid has been on that like a lot.
I mean, it's always on the list. I don't know that it always wins.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't always win, but like
Something
it's
that I see win a lot, um, and it's definitely on my list, is the original Half-Life.
okay.
And I know you weren't like a big PC gamer for like a long time, like kind of for a lot of reasons that we don't really have time to get into. But
I just had a crappy PC like growing up, so we can
I
we
mean,
can
yeah, basically like basic Mickey Mouse explanation.
I can KOTOR on it.
But
I got halfway through disc 4 and then was like I ran out of space.
but like many people see Half-Life as like a classic, and they're like nostalgic for it. But is it still good? And I would argue yes. It defined an entire era of PC gaming. So to me, it deserves all the kind of like praises it gets for like, oh, like you're just nostalgic for it. Like, yeah, but like it defined the genre.
So
Because
now
before
I'm
that,
like
like shooters were like Quake and like Doom, and like they were kind of getting to the point where they're like samey. Guns just like spun around in midair, like they were barbershop poles.
I feel like class like kind of going back to the music and like analogy or whatever, like classic is kind of starting, and it's dumb because I took an art history class and now I like feel like I feel more enlightened about this subject, but like there was a time when in like the early 1800s when everyone just started kind of throwing around the term kind of like classic in a way, but and maybe I have that wrong in terms of like that specific word, but they started basically saying that like music from this certain era that was like right before their era, everyone was just like, this is like the epitome of music, and like we have to like copy it because it's amazing and it's the best, and like you can only play these because they're the best ever, and like if you're making music and it doesn't sound like this, or like if you're like playing music and you're not playing this music, like you're the worst and you're a savage. And so I feel like classic has kind of come to, and like
It
basically
can be
those,
used negatively.
yeah, like those things I think turned a lot of what is considered classical music now into like what it is because they kind of like set the standard. And so I feel like anything up like a classic is something that kind of like defines the genre and stands the test of time a little bit.
Okay.
So I would, but yeah, I mean
Since
by a
since
lot of definitions,
so
Super
so here's
Metroid
the
is
thing.
retro.
Since we're talking about video games, does it have to look good? Because that's always the question on people's mind. Like they like start up Half-Life and they're like, man, this game looks like ass. Like because it came out in year originally.
Hmm.
It came out. Cooperate, please. November 19th, 1998.
Mm,
So, rightly so, that was 21 years ago. You start up
yeah.
the game, it looks like garbage. because it came out 21 years ago. Graphics back then, they weren't great. They were crap. So does it have to look good? Because I would argue no. My
I would argue no.
reaction is no. What do you think? Thoughts?
I would say no as well. But there's definitely like an element of aesthetic, and I think sometimes people like sometimes people will put too much on aesthetic, and for instance, movies that try and use CGI to make up for bad writing.
For
It's
example,
I don't know. I mean, yeah, you could make the argument for like some of the Transformers movies, all of them, just things that like if things are flashy enough, then you'll be fine.
like if
I mean,
Fox runs in slow motion enough, you feel like you get money's worth.
But yeah, I think some people they look at graphics now, and you don't want your game to look.
Graphics now are bonkers. Like, let's get
Yeah.
that. Like, you and I were playing video games in the days when we were like, "Oh man, the Conduit like has such good graphics." And now we're like, what? Like, were we on drugs?
No, I wasn't on any drugs. I was just in
I
love
mean, you
with
had to be on something. You liked the Conduit.
It's a good game.
Oh, it isn't. It's garbage.
Moving on. Like you don't want your game to be like aesthetically displeasing, but I think looking at something from the past critically and saying like this looks bad is unfair to a degree. It's like maybe it doesn't look good by today's standards.
Compare it to now, like because it'll never win. Not ever. Not once. Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
You have to compare it to like other things at the time. So like if you compare it to like, for example, Half-Life. If you compared Half-Life to other games at the time, you'd be like, holy crap, this game looks amazing. Like I can't believe like it looks so like, like it does. But if you compare it to stuff like now, like you compare it to like, I don't know, like Battlefield 5 or something, you're like, what on earth am I looking at? Like why am I looking at this garbage?
There's a good kind of weird random reference. There's a movie called Metropolis.
Yeah.
That is like it's still really good, like for what they had. Like it's
the original, The Day the Earth Stood Still.
I love that movie. So like there's things where you can't like, but I have seen a lot of there, like for instance, there's a sci-fi movie called The Claw, that has like this giant bird, and it's obviously a puppet. Yeah, it's like a giant bird, like a giant vulture that like swoops down and kills people or whatever. Probably radiation. I don't know. My parents watched it and told me about it. I haven't seen it, but like I've seen just like the clips of the bird puppet, and like you can see the strings and like stuff, and so there's things like that where it's like
not scary. It's like not actually scary.
Yeah, like you look back on it and you're like, wow, even for that time, that was terrible. Like
this looks like garbage.
But so and that's once again, that's kind of a matter of opinion. That's something that I try and do, and you try and do with things that are older, is like you try and appreciate them for what they were, but at the same time, if something is like just straight up bad, then it's bad. Like I'm trying to think of games that I played with terrible graphics. Ninja Bread Man for the Wii.
Ninja Bread Man? You played Ninja Bread Man?
I accidentally own it.
You own Ninja Bread Man?
It was a horrible accident. I rented
My
it from
opinion of you,
Blockbuster.
let's,
I
my
rented
opinion of
it
you dropped.
and I forgot to return it. And so then, because the late fee was so great, I ended up just having to purchase it. It's so bad.
Your first problem was that you rented it.
I was hoping it'd be good. I was like, a gingerbread man ninja?
Your
Sounds interesting.
second problem is that you had hope that a game called Ninja Bread Man would be good.
It was a harder platformer than Super Mario 64. It was terrible.
That is a bold claim.
It was hard because it was bad, not hard because it was mechanically difficult.
It was not actual hard, it was imaginary hard.
Yeah, like just like the margins for your jumps were like just wrong, like just barely like
That's
and
why Crash Bandicoot Remastered, the Insane Trilogy, is way harder now than it was then. Because then everything was square. Now you can round off the edges of polygons and textures.
Ooh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
It's frustrating. But great, in my opinion.
I don't even know where we are anymore. Like we're on topic, but
yeah,
yeah,
sort of vaguely we're on topic. Okay, so what games are? What game do you think? Like I said, Half-Life. So what games were good and are still? Like you're like, wow, this game is like still like it's so good. Like you could go back and play it and like have a good time playing it.
Ocarina of Time, like hands down.
Like, why, though? Not, and I don't want to get into a big like to do about it because like I love Ocarina of Time. Like don't get me wrong, but it does have its glaring issues.
It's just like I think in a way you can I'm thinking mid sentence and it makes speaking difficult. the train for
yeah,
thoughts.
there it is. Sonic Adventure reference. Waiting for it. Happens.
I think games that will just like sink you into their environment and their story those are the ones that will often do it. Like, so like, tooting the horn of Super Metroid again, like the environment and the music and everything, like when I hear that music later, like I remember the exact location that I was in the game, like what it felt like being there, like just all of that. And same with yeah, like same with Ocarina of Time, like the environments, like the way that the graphics were used for the time on that system, and the story were like you like you were in the driver's seat.
Hero of time.
Yeah, like it was awesome. Like
timeless.
Yes, or at least there were 7 years that you could jump between. So I'm trying to think of other ones that are just like you just Dishonored for me is one that like I was just part of that was like I was immediately emotionally invested because like in that game it's not directly said, but this is what I inferred like walking into it. Like in the first 5 minutes of that game, like your wife is murdered in front of you and you're thrown in jail. Like,
whoa, spoilers.
Like it's
awesome.
If
you don't know by now, you weren't gonna know. Like,
yeah, and if you're gonna play it, it's in the first 5 minutes of the game. So I mean, like, whatever. But like it's just like just
Brutal.
like I remember those, and admittedly I don't remember the music from Dishonored very well. Like if I were to listen to it now, like I wouldn't really recall anything,
You would
but
be
like
like,
I
"Oh, that's
remember,
Dishonored." Like I was, whatever, doing this thing.
yeah, like I remember the feel of being that character. And so but a little bit that's more like nostalgia, but I think Dishonored is a really good game because of that feeling of like this is a little bit of, well, I guess what makes a game good. I think to a degree it's like your ability to enjoy it. Um, like if you enjoy a game, then that game is good for you. And so that's and then like Minecraft, I remember like that time when we like beat the game, like it was awesome. And I'm sure people have similar experiences to a degree with, like there were matches of League of Legends that I played that I remember that I'm like, oh, like I remember this one time, like, and I have a lot of nostalgia for that. And like, whether or not League of Legends is a good game is like, I don't know, that's up for debate, maybe, but it's some this random guy said it's a good game and like walked off with, like a peace sign.
Oh, like walked by.
Yeah. I think he might have rolled his eyes at me too. Um, but it's like, so okay, uh, like if you enjoy it, then like it's a good game for you. Like, and there's people who maybe don't enjoy League of Legends and who maybe don't enjoy Zelda games or don't enjoy Metro games, whatever, like, and maybe to them they're like, this isn't a good game. But I don't know.
There are times where I'm playing a game and I'm like, this isn't a good game, and then I come back to it and I'm like, this game is great. I felt that way actually about Super Metroid. The first time I ever played Super Metroid, I was like, this game is trash. And I came back to it and I was like, what was I thinking? Like, how could I think that? Like I was disappointed in myself, like actively disappointed in myself. I was like, why did I think this game was trash? Can I help you, dear? No. Are you
Who are
sure?
you saying that to?
Claire, blowing her nose extremely loudly.
That blows. We'll never truly escape.
Okay, so takeaways.
Um, I think people tend to be nostalgic for things that usually are pretty good. I think if you have nostalgia for something that was bad,
You're an
I think
idiot.
it's usually, no. I would say you're usually either nostalgic for it because you were less informed, perhaps, at
Okay.
the time, or you had a really good time with the people that you were with. So like you could have nostalgia for a movie that is awful, but like if you're watching it with friends and laughing at it and like maybe making fun of it, like objectively it's a bad movie, but you loved that experience that you had with like the people that you watched it with. And so like you may watch that terrible movie over and over and over again because it's a terrible movie. So anyways,
People like do that. That's like a thing that people do. They like get together and have like a terrible movie party.
yep.
I'm trying to think of who I know that does that.
Um uh I don't know if I can take pot shots at the room, but like that's one that
Room
people like,
is super garbage.
yeah, like that's one that
Objectively
people
bad.
do. And like people love to hate it. And so it has a cult following
Yeah,
where
Brenda
like
and I got together with some of her friends once and we like watched it. Like to hate it. Like not because we were like, oh, this is a cinematic masterpiece, but like because we were
yeah.
like, this movie's garbage.
Yeah.
Because it is mega garbage. Okay, so what real quick, what's a game that you thought was good at the time that just isn't? Just not. Like it's not good.
Um. That's a hard question because I'm trying to think of there are some games where like when I was playing them, I kind of knew that they weren't great, but I was still playing them because I wanted to finish them. Like Shadow the Hedgehog, like it has 8 different endings, and I wanted to get them all.
That's a bad game.
But ones that I like in the past thought were just amazing, and then played later and
And
realized
you were
weren't
like,
great.
it's bad.
Oh, never. Um. Hmm. I don't know if I have one. I have some that and honestly, for me, most of the time when I go back and play a game, because most of the games I played growing up were RPGs or things that you could like actually
There's
finish.
some sort of agency.
Was like usually when I go back and try and play those again, often I don't like replaying them because I feel like it's like, oh, like why would I play this again? I already know how it ends, and like I already got the emotional fulfillment of beating it. Um, but I'm gonna be terrible. I'm gonna be that guy and be terrible and take pot shots at RuneScape. Um, I don't like the type of game it is, but it's a classic. So like I really enjoyed playing it, but like in terms of like it being a game of skill
I mean, it's
or like
not.
a yeah. So
Like you can't argue that. Like it's not.
yeah. Yeah, I think it was one of those things where like I didn't like it because I think every time I've gone back to it and played it and gotten back into it, I've like remembered my nostalgia for it, especially the music, honestly, because the music's amazing.
See
But
Shanty
then
2, it's lit.
but then I stop because I'm like
Fire.
I'm just gonna have to pour so many hours into this game to get anywhere, and like I don't want to pour those hours
To
into it.
do anything.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I mean, it's a time sink. It's an MMO. Like MMOs are time
yeah,
sinks. That's what they are, and that's what they do.
yeah.
I'm gonna be super super hipster. I'm gonna be that hipster guy. There's this game called Tachyon the Fringe, and it's it's like a space. I don't know,
Neat.
like spaceship kind of game is the best way for me to say it. Like you're in space and you're this like hot shot like pilot who's like like he's like pretty well known and like he's a mercenary but like he's like a good guy or whatever. And so he gets you like go through the first couple missions and you're like, yeah, like I'm awesome, like I'm this guy, like I can't wait to go on these adventures. And then like one of the missions um goes like horribly wrong and all these civilians like die, and then like the police show up and they're like, oh, like this is your fault, and you're like, what? No, like, and you can't escape. And so like there's like trials like very short, like the police were like, we caught you in the act, like you murdered all these people, like, and he's like no I didn't, but there's no stopping because it's part of the game, like, and very early. And so you go they sentence you like sort of to exile. You don't like go to prison, I guess, in the future. They like sentence you to exile like on the fringe of like the universe. And so you have to like start kind of from nothing, start from scratch. And people will comment on you and be like, "Oh, you're like that guy that like murdered all the civilians that one time." Like you're like, "No," but like eventually like this like legend builds up around you that you're this like notorious like crazy murderer person.
That game sounds
Anyway,
awesome.
it is so awesome though, but it's so like bad. Like the combat is bad. It's slow. The pacing of the game is like the pacing of the game gives you whiplash. Especially that in that like very early segment where you're this like awesome like hotshot fighter pilot, and then you go to the fringe or whatever, and like yeah, that's part of the game, and they're trying to pace it because like you're starting over from nothing, but like why would you start with all this awesome gear and like these multiple ships, and you can like load them up with all these like cool like technologies, and then it's like taken all away from you? Why not make that like whole part the tutorial? Because you start out and you have like these two awesome ships, and like you have all this money that you can use to like upgrade them and like do stuff, and then you have
Yeah,
nothing suddenly, and
that
you're like,
that
wait,
is
what the heck?
that is a bad use of in-game like resources.
There's also no way to tell that it's coming. Like none of the other missions are structured that way. So like you're like, oh, I'm gonna go to this colony and like save these like like these all these people like are in danger from this disease. So I'm like gonna go to this colony and save them like somehow. Like it's not explained like how.
Yeah,
And so
it
you like
definitely.
take off in your ship and you like use the jump gate to like warp to that part of the galaxy, and you're like, oh yeah, this is going great. And then like there's a left turn and something goes wrong, and you're like, oh, it'll be fine. Like I'll figure it out. And then like suddenly you have to like blow up this ship with like these infected people, and then like the cops show up and they're like, hey, what the heck? And you're like, wait, what's happening? And then there's this like super cutscene time, and this cutscene is like extra long about like what a shitbag you are because you did all these horrible things, and you're like, wait, what? And everything is just like wrenched away from you. And I guess it's supposed to sort of like make you feel like put you
How
in
the
his
character feels.
shoes.
Yeah.
But like that's a really crappy way of doing that. I think, in my opinion, that's
From an
like a crappy
artistic
way.
standpoint, it's good, but from like an experience, like it sucks because that experience sucks. And so I think a lot of times, like as a game designer, like you want people to be able sometimes to feel like that emotional like powerlessness. Um, like when what I forget her
Mega Man
name.
2.
Yeah, like
Or
Mega
Mega
Man
Man X,
X
rather. Not
is a
Mega
great
Man 2.
example. I was thinking like Final Fantasy VII when what's her face gets killed by Sephiroth. Because I've never played it, I just know that that is like a iconic kind of thing. Um, like one of the characters dies, and you're like, you've been like working so hard this whole time, like adventuring with them, and then like they get killed by the villain, and you're like, and it's during a cutscene, and it's, like there's nothing you can do about it. Like,
Yeah.
so like it's that it's kind of a hard balance. Like in most games now, the good way that that's handled is it's either handled in Metroid games, and this is a critical uh critical what's it
Analysis.
like a negative thing
Criticism.
against critical criticism. That was my struggle. I was like, wait, I can't criticism. That doesn't make sense. A criticism of the Metroid games is like you lose all your powers at the beginning of each one, um, but it happens so fast that like you haven't
You
spent the
never like
whole
you don't
game
get
being
used them.
powerful.
You don't like get used to them.
Yeah, like over
You
time.
don't get accustomed to like being this like super
Yeah,
like
or
amazing like dangerous bounty hunter.
and in a lot of games now, if your powers whatever gear is taken away, it's during a segment that is usually short or meant to be a specific challenge that is viewed as a challenge, and so is it like therefore exciting?
Okay,
Like
and I'm not okay. Let me back up a little bit. I'm not saying that it's bad to have that in a game. I'm just pointing out the way that it is done in particular, like in this one game in Tacky on the Fringe, is horrible.
Yeah.
Because you are right at the point where you're like getting used to like being this powerful like mercenary, and then suddenly like out of nowhere like this happens and you're like, what? And then the pace of the game for the next like 6 hours as you try to like build up money to get like the level 1 laser on your ship so pirates aren't harassing you every 5 seconds. It's just like achingly slow. Anyway, sorry, I had to rant about that for a little bit. All right, well, we'll be back to this at some point, I'm sure. About retro and nostalgia, and like I have a lot of here's another thing though. It's like I have a lot of nostalgia for that game. Like I remember how young I was when I started playing it, and like how much fun I had playing, and like I try not to remember how many hours I sank into it, but like I had a great time playing it. And then I went back, like I was older and like had my own stuff, and like I like went back and like I was like, oh, it's on Steam, and I like bought it, and I played it for like 45 minutes. And I was like, wait, this game is trash. Like what was I thinking? Like why did I like this game? Like I'm not having fun.
Did you have a library card?
With the Arthur reference, really?
Yes. Yes.
Are you more pleased with yourself about the reference, or more
Oh,
pleased
yes.
that I got the reference?
Why not both? Why is there a bowling ball in DW's room?
That I know that's an Arthur reference, but only because of the name W. Not know the rest of that reference.
Yeah. I think it's an episode where he sneaks in to be the be the tooth fairy or something, and he stubs his toe.
Fool. The aardvark, the flattest face ever. Anyway, any final thoughts before we cut?
No, I feel good about our discussion. I feel like it was thorough.
It wasn't as rambly as it usually is. Maybe. I mean, maybe it was. Like, I'll listen back to this and I'll be like, man, this blows.
Yeah.
Or really, I'll be like, well, this is like pretty good, and then like my fiance will have something like harsh and biting to say. I'll just like be sad about it.
I think it had direction, but there were a lot of small tangents, like a cactus. Lots of spines. And I know I'm the worst.
Gonna try to think too hard about that analogy because I feel like it sucks.
They're short tangents. We had a lot of short tangents that were on topic.
Yeah, but cactuses aren't always straight up and down. Sometimes they're like they got like arms and stuff.
That's true. Saguaros.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, so we'll be back with the Dr. Z show next week at the normal time and the normal place. It's gonna be a little bit later because I'm teaching a dance class, which is great. Great fun. But yeah, let us know what games are you guys nostalgic for? What is retro to you? Please let us know in the comments on YouTube or Facebook. And see you next time on the Dr. Z show.
Adios.